state, I was going to mention we have 3 school nurses, counting the supervisor, and we have substitutes and other ancillary personnel and a school physician, and then Lisa's going to talk specifically to both. But I just wanted to be like you're talking about the state, and I'm the state's got investments, and then Lisa was all the actual, unless they want to ask questions.
Yeah, we can open it up to questions. Sure.
I don't think people realize necessarily, because I never gave them a report, they never asked for how many school nurses we actually have.
5 minutes. No, we're not going to talk about it. Okay. School Committeeman Conway.
Actually, Joanne. She's going to go over the state issues. I was going to mention the city budget part, how much we contribute in terms of how many nurses, and then Lisa's less than a minute. Less than a minute.
That's why it came down.
There you go. I guess my reputation.
Everybody in here knows that.
I know nothing. I'll talk about Jane for a while.
I haven't had you yet.
Good old days in Chelsea.
Good evening, everyone. We'd like to start the meeting. This is a regularly scheduled school committee meeting of November 19th. Could we all please stand? We'll begin the meeting by saluting the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Elliott,
Here?
Mr. Gendron,
Here.
Mr. Leary,
Here.
Ms. Martin,
Here.
Ms. Rosikowicz,
Here.
Ms. Scott,
Here.
Mr. Conway.
Here.
7 present.
Present. First, we'll proceed right into the agenda, special order of business. First item, infectious disease report by health department officials Joanne Keegan, Frank Singleton, and Lisa Gilbicki. Chair would like to recognize Madam Chairperson, Ms. Keegan. I'm
Thank
sorry,
you,
Madam
Mr. Mayor.
Superintendent, did you have anything to kick this off? Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Madam Superintendent, school administrators, members of the school committee. Thank you for the opportunity to respond to Mr. Conway's motion. As chair of the Board of Health, one of our roles is to ensure that the local health department promote and protect the health of all of the residents, including the school children. But more specifically, in terms of this motion, my day job happens to be as a public health nursing advisor with the State Health Department in the Bureau of Infectious Disease. And so my role at the State Health Department is to ensure that the local health department has the tools it needs to respond to infectious disease events in the local health departments that I cover. And so in the past, and I assure you in the future, the State Health Department has worked closely with the Lowell Health Department and the school administrators in the event of infectious disease. And most recently comes to mind the tuberculosis case at the high school, where the school administrator, Ms. Jill Lang, and the public health nurses, including the school nurses, worked really tirelessly to ensure that all of the close contacts of the infectious case were identified. They were all screened, and in the end, they were all fully evaluated. And I think it is an example of collaboration between the Bureau of Infectious Disease and the Lowell Health Department and the school department. And I really want to publicly thank them for the job that they did in terms of that case at the high school. Should another infectious disease event occur, such as Ebola, the Department of Public Health would be involved from the beginning in working with the local health department. We currently do have preventive measures in place to ensure that a potential case of Ebola, for instance, is identified as soon as the first symptom appears, and that the person is transported to a medical facility. The DPH Bureau of Infectious Disease has identified 7 hospitals that are currently prepared to receive an Ebola case. And speaking of transferring to medical facility, another role of the Board of Health is to contract with an emergency medical service provider. And I've recently spoken with our emergency medical service provider, whose owner also happens to be the president of the Mass Ambulance Association, and who has assured me that they are prepared should the school department or anyone else need an emergency service provider to respond to any infectious disease, including Ebola. They have the personnel and the equipment, and they feel comfortable that they would be readily available. In addition, the Bureau of Infectious Disease has trained so far 460 school nurses via the School Health Institute in terms of Ebola response. We've issued no less than 18 advisories on the topic, including the November 4th document that was handed out this evening entitled Guidelines for School Nurses. The DPH Bureau of Infectious Disease has a 24/7 hotline that's available for people to call. So far in Massachusetts, there have been 31 travelers that have arrived in the state from the affected countries. Now there are 4 affected countries instead of 3. And they are currently being monitored actively by DPH or the local health department where they reside. And if you have questions about Ebola, and you don't want to ask them in this public forum, of course, there's a website, askebola@state.ma.us. Also, you can go to mass.gov DPH/Ebola for any of the documents that you might be interested in. But in general, in terms of infectious diseases as a whole and the school department's role, I think one of the most important things that the school department can do is to continue to provide warm water and soap to all of the staff and students. And sometimes with so many buildings and different issues, that can be a problem, but it is very important. The other issue now that it's flu season is that it's just a reminder for everyone to get their flu shot. I'm sure you all have heard that the flu pandemic of 1918, nearly 50 million people died. People die every year from the flu in this country, in this state, and so it's important. Mr. Singleton has a great deal of knowledge about the pandemic of 1918. I don't think he'll share it all with you tonight, but I'm not sure if that knowledge is from studying the pandemic or maybe he was around back then. Seriously, though, just a reminder, I think the death toll from flu it should be a reminder for everyone to get their flu shot. And so we'll be available for questions if there are specific questions. Lisa's going to talk a little bit specifically about what the school nurses do in terms of preventing the transmission of disease in the schools. And I just want to thank you for your interest with regard to the health of your students and staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Keegan. We appreciate the update and information.
Yes,
Mr.
Mr.
Singleton,
Mayor, I just want to
as
introduce
much as we would all like to hear about the flu of 1918,
Actually, I just want to introduce Lisa and point out we do have 33 school nurses, including the supervisors, not counting substitute nurses, and a school physician hired by the Board of Health, Dr. Peter Connolly. So we do, and we also have 4 public health nurses, which have been involved, for example, with the TB issue at the high school. So the city does have a fair amount of resources on its own, but we certainly depend on and work with the state or the federal government if needed. The only other thing I want to say before I introduce Lisa, we'll go over specifically school nursing. I use this map a lot. It's the true size of Africa, because we used, way back when I was in school, the Mercator projection, which showed big Europe and little Africa.
Mr. Singleton,
Africa with the United
Frank,
States.
could you just go to the podium so the people at
This is
home can hear you?
Africa with the United States, China, Europe, etc., superimposed on it. It is a massive continent. In fact, the old joke is it's not a country, it's a continent. And yet we have people say, someone just returned from Nairobi, and what about Ebola? Here's West Africa. East Africa is 5,000 miles away. So we do a lot of education of people because they hear Africa and then they're sort of shut down. So we use a lot of these type of graphics. If the membership wants this, actually, I can send this out as a JPG, but it's really an eye-opener when people see this, because we're all locked into the old Mercator projection of here's this big Europe and here's this tiny Africa. It's the other way around. So with no further ado, Lisa, you're the school nurse leader.
Hi.
Thank you,
for
Mrs.
having
Singleton.
us. My name's Lisa Gilbicki. I'm the nurse coordinator for the school health unit. I'll talk just very briefly on what we do on surveillance in the school, and then we can open up to if there's any questions. Joanne did a great job of the collaboration that we have at the local health department along with school nurses. We have the great pleasure of being in the same building, me as the administrator for the school health unit, to work very closely with the public health nurses. So anytime there is any questionable of communicable disease that may affect our students or has affected one of our students in the school, it's not always of just a phone call right next door. Sometimes it's a holler across the hallway to say that there's a potential. Usually when we get those alerts from the public health nurses, I usually connect with Janine Durkin to give her an idea that there may be something going on in one of the schools, but also maintaining that HIPAA regulation that we can't reveal anything until we have confirmation and we speak with family members. That's one aspect. Another aspect is in the schools during just general surveillance. The nurses, as part of their jobs, they do a cluster surveillance. If they start seeing a pattern or a trend that's happening within their school, whether it be just a cluster in the classroom or a cluster within the entire school, if we're all of a sudden seeing GI symptoms and it's, we've had 20 in one day, it obviously, even before that, sends off a red flag and alert. They notify us. We usually notify the rest of the school nurses within the community to see if their schools are having the same issues, and then connect with the public health department as well, the public communicable disease nurses, to see what else is going on within the state, to see if we can do surveillance that way as well. Then obviously we send notices home, instructing parents that there may be something going on in the school. The nurses also notify custodians, principals, and everybody else that needs to know in the building to do extra cleaning in certain areas or the entire school in general. I do want to let you know that we did 3 flu-based clinics in schools this year. We're hoping to extend that and next year to more. We were able to vaccinate 110 students in the schools with flu mist. So those are probably 110 students that would not have received the flu vaccine if it wasn't for the school-based clinic. They were able to do that during the day, so they didn't miss much of class time or for doctor's appointments to be out of school at that time. And I will open that up. Does that answer most of your questions, or do we open it up for questions?
I'm sure we have some questions, but thank you for, since that initial meeting with the city manager, you and Ms. Durkin, the school department, health department, I think we sent a good message that the city has this under control. We have precautions and procedures in place, and so far
Yes.
we're in good shape. Mr. Gendron?
I just had a quick question regarding the flu vaccine at the high school. Is that open up to all students?
We did not do it at the high school. We did it at 3 schools this year. We did it at the Stocklosa, the, well, wait a minute, the Riley, the Stocklosa, and Bartlett.
Okay, so there were no vaccines at the high school?
There was no vaccines at the high school.
Okay, thank you.
But we'll look into that for next year as well. We have not done the flu vaccine in the school as a school-based clinic for a few years, and we were slowly getting our feet back into it. And we were trying to, it was the first time we've ever done elementary students, and they did much better than the middle school.
It might be something worth looking into. We wouldn't want 1918 to break out again. Maybe we could
Exactly.
start at Lowell High School. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Ms. Ross Sigowitz?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make an observation. I'm surprised that you didn't have a higher turnout in terms of children that were receiving the flu-mist vaccine in our schools, because it was not just open to families that rely upon public insurance, but it was open to private insurance as well. So I thought that was a huge win, a huge time saver for our family, and certainly very convenient and the most conducive, I suppose, most desirable means of receiving a flu vaccine is by mist, which I know my kids prefer.
Yes, they
Thank
do.
you.
They do prefer that. It does have some limitations with those students that have asthma, so we had to turn away a few of them, but not many. And we're looking into the future for next year, possibly combining with the adult flu clinic. Other school-based clinics do that and do a family clinic, which we may get a better turnout as well.
Further questions? Mr. Conway?
Thank you. Not necessarily a question, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make a quick comment. I want to thank the Health Department for their presentation, and I want to thank Joanne personally, and Frank and Lisa for coming forward. I put this motion on because I did have a few parents that were concerned, and they just wanted to get, should we say, an update on what was happening. And as we all know, especially the elementary and the middle schools, and sometimes those notices don't somehow get into the bags, or if they get lost and so forth. And that's why I thought it might be a good idea just to come forward, and I thank you very much for doing that, to enlighten the public on what is going on, and we truly appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Conway. So just one last follow-up question. On the flu mist, 110, I mean, we have 14,000 children. Is it, it wasn't a matter of shortage, it was just a matter of, about how many did we have available? And moving forward, just for people at home watching this, the procedure is simple. You just, there's a notification slip, bring it in signed, or maybe you can just run through it real quick.
Yep, we received 250 doses of the flu mist. We took an estimate of what we would expect. It only went out to those 3 schools, so we're looking at approximately, I think it was 1,700 flyers that went home. Along with that flyer went the fact sheet of the flu mist, the limitations of, again, the asthma or egg allergy. And also it's a spray on one side of the nose and the other, and a tissue, and that's it. There's no injectables or anything. And then an insurance form or insurance card to fill out. For them to give their insurance. If they didn't have any insurance, we would still administer the flu mist. So it was open to any and all insurances or no insurance at all. And then a consent for the parents, because obviously they were not present during that time. So unfortunately, we did give the supply to another supplier at Lowell Community Health Center that could use the flu mist vaccine, so it wouldn't spoil at the health department. We do still have adult flu, so if anybody would like one, please come see us on Fridays from 1 to 4. Or anytime you can call and somebody will be available to give you a flu.
I think all of us except Mr. Leary have our flu shots, so maybe you can talk to him later. He doesn't like needles, maybe he can do the mist. Any other questions by members? Am I right? Thank you so
Thank
much,
you very much.
Ms. Gilpicki. We appreciate it. Thank you, Ms. Keegan and Mr. Singleton. Moving on to the next section of the agenda, we have minutes. We have approval of the minutes of the regularly scheduled school committee meeting of Wednesday, November 5th. Motion to accept and place on file by Mr. Leary, seconded by Mr. Gendron. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And the opposed, that motion carries. Next item on the agenda, we have a permission to enter November 19th. Madam Superintendent?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. To the Brandon Residential Treatment Center Incorporated in the amount of $54,839 to provide for the out-of-district tuition costs for one student enrolled in receiving services as outlined in the special education IEP, funding provided by the school department special education tuition account. To FLAC Educational Collaborative in the amount of $53,344 to provide for out-of-district tuition costs for one student enrolled in receiving services as outlined in their special education IEP, funding provided by the school department special education tuition account. To the McLean Hospital Corporation in the amount of $54,814 to provide again for the out-of-district tuition costs for one student enrolled in receiving services as outlined in their special education IEP, funding provided by the school department special education tuition account. To the Robert F. Kennedy Children Action Corps in the amount of $56,573 for the out-of-district tuition costs for one student receiving services as outlined in their IEP from the special education tuition account. To Deborah Kopkowski in the amount of $12,125 to provide professional development for administrators and classroom teachers, special education staff who will learn key concepts related to balanced literacy instruction and assessment in alternative school settings. This funding is provided by the Title I grant.
Excuse me, questions on any of these items? Move to approve by Ms. Martin, seconded by Ms. Ross Sikowitz. Roll call.
Mayor Elliott,
Yes.
Mr. Gendron,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Martin,
Yes.
Ms. Ross Sikowicz,
Yes.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Conway.
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
Moving on to the next section of the agenda, we have memorials. We have Carol Stiles, she's a retired Merkland school teacher and mother of special education director Jennifer McChrystal. Could we all please rise for a moment of silence, and could we darken the chambers? May she rest in peace. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, we have public participation. That motion has been withdrawn. So we're moving on to motions of the evening. Ms. Martin, could you please take the chair?
Our first motion by Mayor Rodney Elliott requests the superintendent consider developing a curriculum at Lowell High School that focuses on science, technology, engineering, and math. Seconded by Mr. Leary. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. This motion came as a result of Councilor Ed Kennedy, who had filed a motion at the City Council meeting requesting that I bring this motion forward to develop a STEM curriculum at the high school. I did indicate that as a result of motion by Ms. Martin, we had just started one at the middle school level. So with that, I'm bringing this motion forward, and I'm not sure your thoughts, Madam Superintendent, or, I'm sure if we can get some costs associated with this, but it seems to be a trend in high schools, and Councilor Kennedy thought, it would be certainly an advantage in attracting and keeping students to the high school. So do many high schools have these at this point?
We have a number of courses that are related to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. There is actually a pathway of STEM courses. We also have the affiliation with M2D2, which is the university program. But Mayor, it's always good to get an update, and I would suggest that we either put this through the curriculum or Lowell High Subcommittee. Either would be a great venue for Curriculum Director McLeod and Headmaster Martin to really make everybody be aware of what exists and what, in fact, the future planning is.
So that was mentioned, and I am aware of a pathway curriculum. Is it similar? Is just different identification name, or is there something that has to be added to make it a STEM program?
A combination of classes. When children are charged with a program of studies and they have a particular pathway, they're looking at a combination of classes, science, technology. To be honest with you, in our pathway, there are all different kinds of science courses, but they do come together. For the children who are on the engineer route, guidance counselors will in fact choose the classes that are going to get them to that kind of a concentration, if you will. There will be children who take the general pathways, the regular science classes, but then there are children who may in fact be on that train to go towards more of a STEM. But I think it's really a very good idea for us to bring it forward, to look at it with the high school staff, telling us in fact what they're thinking. This relatively new team at Lowell High School is doing a lot of very innovative things, and so it's probably a really nice time for us to check in again about what those courses are and how they come together. For certain kids on a path, you will know there's AP courses, there's all kinds of opportunities, but we would be more than willing through either Lowell High subcommittee or joint, if you want, subcommittee, to bring that forward, because it's nice to check in with that current STEM look.
That's the way to categorize. I'm just asking these questions. We're going to bring this back to the council, let them know that the motion was discussed, and this is the discussion, but to take the current look at what we have. Thank you very much.
So if we can, we'll accept an amendment to the motion to refer it to the curriculum instruction subcommittee. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Aye.
We already did, the mayor and O'Leary. Second motion of the evening, also by Mayor Rodney Elliott, requests the superintendent contact area banks to seek support in expanding financial literacy programs. Seconded by Mr. Gendron. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Vice Chair. So one day, it was a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, I was invited by someone at Washington Savings, would I come in kind of last minute, to say hello to the children while she was, I think it was the first time this year that she was bringing in piggy banks and rolling out the financial, what did she call it? Financial literacy. Thank you, Ms. Rosikowitz. And I thought it was fabulous. I thought it was a great opportunity to start teaching kids at a very young age. It was at the Morey School, the importance of saving and what things cost. They only do it at a couple of schools, so I didn't know if it was possible to try to expand it to the other schools, because the Washington Savings, they can only dedicate, one employee for X amount of hours a week or a month, if you will. I think she goes in every week, quite frankly. And so I thought, well, let's, first let the superintendent know, what she probably already does, that it's really a nice service that the Washington Bank does for the community. Maybe there's some other banks that would like to go in and, have the kids set up an account. It doesn't cost anything for the kids, but it's a good learning tool anyway. So I wanted to bring this forward to see the superintendent's thoughts on this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Martin. Washington Savings Bank is one of the many banks. As you know, John Dock has a branch at Lowell High School. There's many programs. So what I think is a first step would be to let the committee know what banks are involved. I think we have a little bit of something in many of our schools, depending on the neighborhood, but we can make sure we know what's happening and then look, in fact, how we can expand it. Nobody's more generous than our local bankers from Enterprise. All of them have something to do with our schools, but if we could probably upgrade you first and then make sure that everybody has that affiliation, we'll work on it through the curriculum office.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Conway.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is a great idea. I really do. There are too often we find that individuals run into financial problems, and to be quite frank with you, I don't think that they really receive the background in understanding finances. We try to certainly teach everything to our students, but sometimes I think things like this might slip through the cracks. And I'm sure that the bankers will certainly, they've always been great partners with the school system, and I'm sure that they'll be very, very happy to come forward and help our students. And I think that this is certainly going to better inform them and make things perhaps a little bit easier financially as time goes on. Thank you.
Ms. Scott, and Mr. Mayor, would you mind? Thank you. Ms. Scott.
Thank you very much. We did have a motion on the floor a year ago by Ms. Rossikwich and myself to do exactly the same thing, to expand the banking program to all of the elementary and middle schools. At that time, I know at my children's school, a program started, and since then, it has already ended at the school. I don't know if there's, consistency across the district, if certain banks fall out, whether or not another bank wants to step in. If we can, I look forward to the report and update on it anyways. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I wish I would have known that. It wasn't here a year ago.
Thank you very
Ms.
much,
West-
Mr. Mayor. If I
Ms.
could.
Martin?
So, and certainly as Ms. Scott references, there have been a number of different financial literacy efforts that have happened, both at it's certainly been discussions at the state level about ways that we can incorporate financial literacy more and more into our programming. Here in Lowell, we've had a number of efforts with varying degrees of attachment, let's say. Some really caught on, some have not necessarily, and I think bear looking at again. I will say one of the programs that's part of my division in my real world at Community Teamwork has been financial literacy, and we offer programming, for all ages. But one of the key things I think has been that I know a member of my staff, who is our expert, was part of a school committee, a school department committee, in implementing the most recent iteration of this was focused on pulling together a specific course at the high school that focused on financial literacy, on exactly how much do things cost? How do you do a budget? How do we anticipate those types of things? I'd love to include that in the report so that we could see how that has really, how successful that's been at the high school. And I would just say that there are, between the local banks, local credit unions are very involved in this financial literacy effort. No doubt they would be extremely interested in engaged with trying to work with students, I think, from across the district. And I know that there are certainly Community Teamwork as an agency and a number of other agencies involved in this would be willing to work together to get this information out. So I think it's a great motion, and I think if it can really spur us to get more and more of this programming into the schools, that is a good thing.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Ms. Rossikwich, excuse me.
On the same subject, I was advised recently that the freshmen at the Freshman Academy aren't allowed to access the Gendoc Credit Union in the main building. Is that correct? Okay. Is there somehow we can change that? We'd have a set time. It's just something, perhaps, if we want to expand our financial literacy, it should include all of our kids and not just an exclusive benefit for the upperclassmen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rossikwich. Ms. Scott?
I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Mayor, for bringing the motion forward. It was very timely to get an update. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Scott. You're welcome. Appreciate it. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion as amended to include a report on the high school signify by saying aye, and the opposed, motion carries. Next motion of the evening. Next motion of the evening by Mr. Conway, to ask the superintendent to meet with the Lowell Chief of Police.
Mr. Mayor?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Gendron. Request school, my apologies. Next motion of the evening is by Mr. Gendron. Request the school committee extend the contract of Gene Franco by 1 year through June of 2016. So, second by Mr. Leary and Mr. Gendron.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the announcement that Superintendent Franco made yesterday certainly took the steam out of this motion, but I wanted to take this opportunity to publicly congratulate you, Superintendent Franco, on your decision to bring a long, well, not that long, 39-year illustrious career in public education to a close. And, but this isn't an ending tonight. Obviously, we have 7 months ahead of us, and they're going to be a busy 7 months. So I look forward to working with you on closing the initiatives that can be closed and teeing up, those issues that can't be for the next administration. And Mr. Mayor, I would suggest that I would like to propose a substitute motion to this motion, asking the committee to begin the process immediately in a search for a new superintendent. And by that, I would suggest, perhaps we could look to the administration for direction as to, what are some methods that various communities have used in the past, and what are methods that the city of Lowell has used in the past to seek out candidates and interview candidates and so forth, blue ribbon panels, what have you. It'd be good to have some options that we can look at and decide on how we would want to go forward. And the other thing I might want to suggest, Mr. Mayor, is that you consider doing a ad hoc subcommittee for the process itself, to help define the process and sort of administer the process amongst the school committee. So the motion would be simply to request the school committee to begin the process immediately of searching for a replacement for Superintendent Franco this summer.
Okay, substitute motion by Mr. Gendron to initiate the process of the search process by the school committee, and if we could just add to that, or to include in the motion that the superintendent and the front office provide a report, if you will, or some information on the process, the prior process used, selection process. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes,
Mr.
that makes sense.
Okay, second by Mr. Leary. On that motion, Ms. Martin?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. If I could, and I know it wasn't specifically delineated in the motion as described to the superintendent, but the existing personnel subcommittee has historically begun this process. As always with all personnel subcommittees, every member of the committee is welcome to attend and participate. So what I would recommend is that as the administration is pulling together the information on past searches and all that, that we can begin it with the personnel subcommittee. Generally, what's happened is that at that initial meeting, we're able to look at the different options and set a timeline. I would certainly recommend that we set an aggressive one. But so that the entire committee can participate in kind of setting those guidelines, discussions around blue ribbon commissions, discussions around how we populate a blue ribbon commission, where we want to advertise. All those different decisions can be made within that subcommittee. Honestly, can be made, I think, within that first meeting, so that we can really lay in place a process that will allow us to certainly conduct an aggressive search, be able to include important stakeholders from throughout the community, which personally I think has been very helpful to us over the years, and be able to lay out exactly how we'd like the search to work, so that we can get the strongest result as a result of it. So.
Okay, Mr. Gendron, any objection to including as part of your motion that this report information and process be referred to the personnel subcommittee?
No, that makes perfect sense. Personnel subcommittee seems to be the appropriate place to do that investigation.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion on the substitute motion? Roll call.
Mayor Elliott?
Yes.
Mr. Gendron?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Rosikowicz?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
Thank you. Move on to the next motion of the evening. This time, motion by Mr. Conway to ask the superintendent to meet with the Lowell Chief of Police to discuss the merit and feasibility of installing the shooter protection system for improved safety in our schools. Seconded by Ms. Scott. Mr. Conway.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the safety is obviously an ongoing issue for all of us, and I think obviously every one of us are trying to make the schools and the environment for our education the safest possible. I happened to see this on one of the networks that they had this type of program, and I believe it was in Methuen that they put this in. And it kind of intrigued me, to tell you the truth. I really don't know a lot about it, And that's why I think it might be a good idea if the superintendent, if you could just meet with them and find out what this system is all about, whether it has been used in other places and whether it has been effective. And obviously, we go to the police because they are the ones that are going to have that kind of information and knowledge. And also to bring back, what type of, what's the feasibility of it and what type of cost would it be for our school system. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Conway. Further discussion on this motion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And the opposed, the motion passes. Next motion of the evening by Ms. Scott, request the superintendent provide a monthly financial update, including year-to-date expenditures and overtime reports. Second by Ms. Ross-Sikowitz. Ms. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A vote has been taken by this committee in the past to receive both monthly financials and overtime reports. We have not received them on a consistent basis. I just brought this forward to reaffirm the need for this committee to receive this very important information on a timely basis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Scott. Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. And the opposed? Motion carries. Next motion of the evening by Mr. Gendron, request Lowell High School headmaster to report on the possibility of students using courtyards during the school day. Seconded by Mr. Conway. Mr. Gendron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an idea that came out of our our joint meeting with the student government from Lowell High School. There was a student there who, wondered why the students could never use the outdoor courtyards. Well, you probably wouldn't want to use it on a day like today, but on warmer days, perhaps for lunch or other reasons. So I thought it might be worthwhile exploring that with the headmaster. And I'd like to suggest, I know Mr. Conway has a Lowell High School subcommittee meeting scheduled later in December. That'd probably be the appropriate place to have that conversation. So I'd recommend that we refer this to that subcommittee.
Motion by Mr. Gendron, refer this request to the Lowell High School Subcommittee. Second by Mr. Leary. All those in favor signify by saying aye. And the opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to the next motion of the evening, again by Mr. Gendron, we have a request that the Lowell High School Athletic Director report to the Athletic Subcommittee on the status of the Lowell High School hockey team. Second by Mr. Leary. Mr. Gendron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's been some discussion in the community about the fact that the Lowell High has been unable to field, I guess, ice a hockey team or put a hockey team on the ice, or maybe having to reach out to middle school students in order to do that. So I'd just like to hear from the athletic director exactly what's happening there at the next athletic subcommittee and find out if there's anything we can do to improve that situation.
Very good. Ms. Leary?
Through you to Madam Superintendent, do we know anything right now about that? 'Cause this is the first I'm hearing of it.
Madam Superintendent?
I am uninformed about hockey, I have to admit. I do not know.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Further discussion on this motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. And the opposed? That motion passes. Next motion of the evening, again by Mr. Gendron. Requests the Lowell High School headmaster report to the athletic subcommittee on the status of Lowell High School sports statistician. Second by Ms. Martin. Mr. Gendron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I was informed that we used to have a statistician on as a stipended position at the high school that kept track of statistics across the years, which was valuable to the Lowell High School Athletic Hall of Fame Committee. So I'd like to hear from the headmaster what the status is of that position and if it makes sense to consider it in the future.
Very good. Further discussion on this motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. And the opposed? Motion passes. Next motion of the evening by Ms. Scott. Request the superintendent develop a plan to participate in the CS Education Week of December 8th through December 14th. Seconded by Ms. Martin. Ms. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was recently approached by a couple of local computer programmers that wanted to know about volunteering in our school for this annual event that happens. They call it the Hour of Code. I was unfamiliar with it, so I looked it up. you're unfamiliar with it too. It's a national movement. It's kicked off by President Obama last year. It's a global movement, I'm going to read from the site, reaching tens of millions of students in 180 countries. Anyone, anywhere can organize an Hour of Code event, and 1-hour tutorials are available in over 30 languages. Some stats from last year's Hour to Code in the schools, 15 million students worldwide learned an hour of code, and more girls tried computer science during this time period than in the past 70 years. I would really appreciate moving forward, taking a look at the information on this site, and I'd appreciate your support on the motion.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Further discussion, comment? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Next motion of the evening by Ms. Scott, requests the superintendent develop a middle school lyceum program. Seconded by Ms. Ross-Sikowicz. Ms. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's back again. Ms. Ross-Sikowicz and I made a motion for the superintendent to develop a plan to implement a Latin Lyceum program last year. The program would offer rigorous curriculum to our advanced students in Lowell Public Schools and an option for some parochial schools and maybe some charter school students to come back to our district. The superintendent came forward with a plan to increase differentiated instruction. It was not the direction that had been given by the committee at the time to develop a Lyceum program. Some leaders at the time referenced MCAS scores as a reason not to offer the program, and that was troubling to me. Perhaps we could look at cities like Boston and Framingham that offer gifted and talented classes for some direction for our district. And I'm asking for your support so that we can meet the needs of our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Mr. Leary?
Just a question. I thought that came back that it wasn't feasible to do it. But maybe my memory doesn't, again, my voice is going too, so I apologize. I also thought part of the STEM program was part of that outreach at the same time, as part of that, as a process going forward. I don't remember actually saying that we were going to develop a Lyceum program. I think that's where I'm a little confused on it. I don't recall the actual discussion around it, and I apologize, I'm a little bit feverish right now, so I'm not really remembering all of it anyway, but yeah, I should have the flu shot. But bottom line is, I don't think we voted to do it. I think we voted to see if it was feasible to do it. But again, I think that's something we should probably put to the curriculum subcommittee and have a discussion regarding it. And really, if there's an issue where we could do this and replicate it through across all of our schools in the middle schools, all 7 of them, I think that would be something that would be of merit. I think that's one of the reasons I think my colleague has expressed as well. If you give to one, not the other, is always an issue of why is one location does not have something that another location has. But if I remember correctly, this is where the STEM, really the K through 8 program actually originated from. So I like to really make a friendly amendment to make it to go to the curriculum subcommittee to have additional dialogue. Thank you.
And I'm fine with that.
Motion by Mr. Leary, seconded by Mr. Gendron to refer this motion to the curriculum subcommittee. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next motion of the evening, again by Ms. Scott. Request superintendent provide a timeline on spelling instruction across the district. Seconded by Ms. Martin. Ms. Scott?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Sorry for so many of them. I was out last meeting. I've been approached by parents on a fairly consistent basis, and one of their concerns that they bring up is spelling. And I often hear, my middle schooler still can't spell, and they want to know what the timeline is for spelling instruction in the district. As a parent of an elementary and a middle school child myself, I also question that exact thing. 2 very different approaches to spelling with 2 different children at the same school. So I'm just curious to see what the actual curriculum is that we're following. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Superintendent?
Thank you, Ms. Scott. The spelling curriculum is embedded in the modules that are used, but at that same very long curriculum subcommittee meeting, I can ask Miss Abrams to take that spelling piece out or to just focus on it so we can get an update. Spelling as phonics, it's embedded in our lessons, and if you want more clarity, we'll be happy to provide that.
Yes, please, I'd appreciate that, because I had one child that had, a weekly, and I understand what these parents mean. One child had weekly spelling words, had a weekly spelling test, the other had none, so the teacher said it was embedded into the curriculum, the reading, and so if we could pull that out, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Last motion of the evening by Ms. Scott requests the superintendent provide an update on the uniformity of course offerings and curriculum of all the elementary and middle schools across the district. Second by Mr. Conway. Ms. Scott.
Again, I brought this forward out of concerns that I heard mostly about the math programming that was happening across the district. I did speak with Ms. Abrams about this. She said we are fairly consistent in not teaching algebra across the district. But there are some schools that were on a different path, I guess. They weren't doing the same thing. So if you could give us an update also to make sure that the other area was science programming at different schools. I heard it was not the same at each school following the curriculum. I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Further questions on this motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. And the opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to the next section of the agenda, we have reports of the superintendent. We have disposal of surplus materials, textbooks. Madam Superintendent?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a report from Assistant Superintendent Abrams in answer to the motion by Mr. Conway to request that the superintendent provide a report recommendations regarding disposal of outdated textbooks and other associated material. There is a policy dating back to November 12, 2003 about disposal of surplus supplies. Through the policy, which is on your second page here, it appears that when there is something that needs to be disposed of, over the amount of $5,000, it has to be advertised through the business office to see if it can be sold. When it has a monetary value of that much, it has to be disposed of in the best manner possible with approval from the business office. So if there is a large amount of materials that have that kind of a value, it goes through Mr. Lang's office. Additionally, if the items are less than $5,000, actually, I'm going to ask Mr. Lang to talk about the second part of this, which is student activity agency account. You know more about it than I.
Mr. Lang?
Thank you. Yes, just to review the policy, it basically just comes down to the value of the product that you're looking to dispose of. So if something has a value, a collective value of over $5,000, we publicly advertise it, and it would go out to whoever the highest bidder is. And then if we receive the funds would be deposited in the student activity fund. If something is, has a nominal value under $5,000, oftentimes what schools will end up doing, if it's outdated textbook material, things like that, they might give it to kids to take home as supplemental reading materials. If something is ripped or damaged or torn, it can be recycled. They just need to keep some record of what they did with the product, so someone would never come back and say, there's 50 math books going or something like that. But really, anything that's under $5,000, we try to make it as easy as possible for the schools. They basically just need to document the need that they don't need it anymore. And again, it can be given out to kids. It can be recycled. It doesn't need to stay on site. Anything over $5,000, though, would have to be publicly advertised. So they'd have to put a list together, send it to me, and then we'd advertise it through the city.
Thank you, Mr. Lang.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Conway?
Yeah, thank you. I want to thank the superintendent and Assistant Superintendent Claire Abrams for taking care of this report, and I want to thank Mr. Lang for his explanation. There were a couple staff members that asked me to come up and take a look at the school, and I did see quite a bit of materials that looked like they were certainly outdated. And I think that, as most people that work in the school system would be hesitant just to take something and throw it away or to give it away. I certainly understand that. Now, when you mentioned that was back in 2003, would this policy be given given to the staff each year. And the reason why I say that is because we have so many new staff members that, they wouldn't know about the policy in 2003. So is there a way that we can give an update on that each year, perhaps?
The policy manual exists it's under the direction of every building manager. And so if staff wants to dispose of material, they go to the principal, and then that's when the principal will then in fact get in touch with Mr. Lang if it's more than that $5,000 threshold. So what happens, and I know that the policy manual is being revised at this particular point, we get emails, and when I was in charge of curriculum, it happened quite often, as a matter of fact, that someone would say, we have these old books, they would be in touch with us. So the principals usually the ones who are kind of mining what are in those old book rooms that kind of come to us. So really, the teachers, in essence, need to come to the principals, but in an upcoming administrative highlights, I think I'll send a reminder. This is a good time for me to send a reminder on what that policy is. Many times, it's at the end of the year, beginning of the year, when we're buying new materials. That's when we're contacted and say, what do you think is this worth more than $5,000? But teachers should actually just tell the principal when they want to dispose of something, and then if it gets to be more than just give it to the kids, which happens in a lot of cases, they go through the process. But we'll remind them, that's a good idea.
I appreciate that, because the library that I went into, books and so forth were really stacked up all over the place, and I took a look at the copyrights, and they were quite outdated. So I appreciate your efforts in that, Madam Superintendent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conway. Further discussion? Entertain a motion to accept the report as a report of progress by Mr. Genron, second by Mr. Conway. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item under reports of the superintendent, we have the personnel report. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is your monthly report that updates you on retirements, resignations, any new hires, and teachers who are hired from the eligible teacher list.
Entertain a motion to approve by Ms. Martin, second by Ms. Rosikowicz. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? That report is accepted as a report of progress. Next report from the superintendent is response to the Lowell High School swimming pool scoreboard motion. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a response to a motion by Mr. Conway to ask the superintendent to meet with the headmaster of Lowell High to devise a plan that will replace or repair the clock or scoreboard in the pool complex. Mr. Martin has met with the athletic director as well as the city electricians. He is including for us this evening part of the quote in a capital plan project. So if we look, and I think this probably should be referred to have a conversation, in essence, if you look at the second page, in looking at replacing that scoreboard, Mr. Martin has one quote from the city electricians that comes to a total of $18,000 for a scoreboard, $3,000 for installation, touchpad systems and training. Total will be $29,000, but there's other attached details that he got in that quote, but that was the answer to the amount it would cost to update that particular swimming pool financially. Any other questions you might have might be better if we ask Mr. Conway. I don't know if Mr. Lang has those details, but this is what he gave us for the quote when you asked for how much that would be.
I think that it might be a good idea that we take this and we put it into the Lowell High School athletic, well, we could do it in the Lowell High School subcommittee and discuss it in more detail, because it was my understanding there was a possibility that you could, the individual, the company that is putting together the clock out at the stadium, somehow, perhaps try to get a deal with the two of them going at the same time. Because again, I think it's a little. I'm not going to start repeating the things that I said before on it, but it's something that we should definitely take a look at, because it's a little embarrassing to have people coming in from the outside and it really nothing works on that. It really is. So I hope that we can somehow figure that out and make sure that we can take care of that situation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So that was a motion to refer this to the Lowell High School Subcommittee. Second on the motion, Mr. General?
On that,
On that
Mr.
motion,
Mayor, we
Mr.
had
General.
already, when this originally came up, we had referred it to the athletic subcommittee, and I have it on the agenda for that subcommittee that's on December 2nd, before the next meeting, so.
So we'll
I'd
withdraw
suggest
that
you just
motion.
keep it right
There's
there.
no need to send it. Is that right? Okay, Mr. Conway?
Yeah,
it's
that's
already on the
fine,
agenda.
that's fine,
Okay.
either one.
All set, Mr. General. Mr. Leary? Ms. Ross Sikowitz, and then Ms. Martin.
Thank you. I just have a quick question on this particular piece. Now, the quote that was attached, is that one of 3 or 4 bids that were obtained? I mean, did this go through a formal bidding process? I mean, it's a fairly tidy sum of money, and certainly I would think that we'd have to abide by procurement law to secure the service, right?
Right. Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Lang.
Thanks. Yeah, this is really just for budgeting purposes. Each year, the schools submit, as part of their capital plan requests, different items that they'd like to see replaced. And we usually just have them at that point in time, just get one quote so that we can put a dollar amount to the request. This request actually did come about a year or so ago. At that point in time, the clock in the swimming pool itself was working. We don't have the touchpad system, and we don't have one of the other systems that this would actually do. This is really a fully integrated system. And I think it was during this swim season that the clock stopped working, so it wasn't anticipated that that was going to happen. But this is really just to give us a dollar amount to know what we need to budget for in the capital plan. If funds were allocated, then because of the dollar threshold, this project would have to go out to bid. It's over $25,000, so it would have to be a bid project. But we're not at that point yet.
All set? Ms. Martin, are you all set? Okay. Further discussion on this motion? Well, actually, it's just a motion, entertain a motion to accept the reporter's report of progress and place on file by Mr. General, seconded by Mr. Leary. All those in favor signify by saying aye. And the opposed? Report is accepted as a report of progress. Moving on to the next item, we have convention/conference request. The first request is permission to send 25 Lowell High students and 4 staff members as chaperones: Maria Vejar, Carla Correa, Damarie Montoya, and Julio De Carvalho, to travel to the Galapagos Islands. This trip is in accordance with the Massachusetts curriculum framework. The trip is scheduled during April vacation. However, in order to get the full experience of this trip, 2 extra days are needed for traveling purposes. Students will leave on April 15th, return on Monday, April 25th, 2016. 1 substitute will be needed for 2 days. However, the cost of the substitute of $200 will be paid by Explorica Travel. The total cost of the student will be $3,669. Chaperones will be responsible for all their own expenses. Question, Ms. Martin?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Certainly will be voting in favor of this trip for our students. I just wanted to kind of issue a reminder through the superintendent to the teachers who are involved with this, that we do have in place the Martha McQuaid Adventure Fund, which does provide a full cost for a student from Lowell High School going on one of the Lowell High School trips. Generally, we have 1 to 2 available over the course of a year. It's been a while since we've approved one, so I just want to kind of remind staff at the high school, we have Stephen Jarvis and Phil Maya, who are our representatives of the fund. So for the chaperones who are involved in this, as they can check in with those 2 individuals who've been very helpful over the years to make appropriate referrals for any students who may want to apply for these funds that would pay for their entire trip to the Galapagos Islands, and maybe they'll discover something that Darwin missed. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So, so the cost, Madam Superintendent, each individual student pays their own cost. Okay. Pretty good at high school. Motion to approve by Ms. Rosikowicz, second by Ms. Scott. Roll call.
Mayor Elliott?
Yes.
Mr. Gendron?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Rosikowicz?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Approved, 7, yay.
Not necessarily that order. So we have another request for permission for Title I Director Patricia Gajeka to attend the annual Council of Administrators of hard time tonight, compensatory education conference to be held on Tuesday, December 2nd through Friday, December 5th in Chatham, Mass. The cost of the conference will not exceed $895 and will be funded by Title I. Substitute is not needed. Move to approve by Ms. Martin, second by Ms. Rosikowicz. Roll call.
Mayor Elliott?
Yes.
Mr. Gendron?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Rosikowicz?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
Thank you. Having no further business before the committee tonight, I entertain a motion to adjourn by Mr. Genman, seconded by Mr. Conway. All those in favor signify by saying aye. And the opposed, motion carries. This meeting stands adjourned.